I think we're good. So good morning in Europe and good afternoon here in Southeast Asia. Welcome everyone to this webinar, Practical Pointers for Developing Your Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions Postdoctoral Fellowship Proposal. This is brought to you by Euraxis Worldwide and the regional hubs of ASEAN, Korea, and Japan, and the Marie Curie Alumni Association chapter of Southeast Asia. So my name is Jenny Lynn Elmaco. I'm a regional coordinator for Euraxis ASEAN and current chair of the Marie Curie Alumni Association chapter in Southeast Asia. And I am joined by my wonderful colleagues who I invite to say some words when I say your name. So first we have Dr. Susan Renzo Vasu from Euraxis ASEAN. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Jenny. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you. And we have Dr. Tomasz Wierzbowski. I'm sorry if I murdered your name. Very, very sorry. From Euraxis Korea. Hello, Tomasz.
That was perfect. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Tomasz. I'm based in Seoul, and I'm happy to meet you all.
Thank you, Tomasz. And of course, Dr. Judith Erika Magyar from Euraxis Japan. Hello, Judith.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to those of you who have joined us in the webinar. I'm Judith Erika Magyar, as Jenny has mentioned, and a very warm welcome to all of you. We are very happy to see you in great numbers, and we are very much looking forward to your questions. So please use the Q&A box to type your queries, and we'll make it possible for you to listen to the answers at a later stage. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So thank you to all of you. So as you can see, we are joined by guests. They will be introduced a little bit later. But if you are joining us for the first time, may I introduce Euraxis. So Euraxis, Researchers in Motion, is an initiative of the European Research Area. It is the operational hub or the operational side of the European Commission strategy, and it addresses barriers to the mobility of researchers and seeks to enhance the career development of researchers. The Euraxis initiative strives to become the global support tool for researchers. So in our website, if you can do a Google search, you can find thousands of job offers and fellowships, tools and resources and a wealth of information which can help you in your career. So if you haven't already, please connect to us, please Google us, depending on which part of the world you are in. A quick search will also show us on your social media platforms. So we are on all of them. We are on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So right now there are 362 people in the room. Hello, everybody, and thank you again for joining us. Today, we will be talking about the MSCA Postdoc Fellowships. We have our two main guest speakers, Dr. Branwen Hyde and Dr. Brian Cahill. Both are experts on the program. I will introduce both of them. And we have also two fellows who will be introduced by our other Euraxis coordinators later. So Dr. Branwen Hyde, she's waving to you right now. You can wave to us, Dr. Branwen. There she is Senior European Advisor at the UK Research Office and National Contact Point for the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions. So this afternoon, or morning for you, those in Europe, she will aim to provide an overview of the policy aims and objectives which underpin the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships, as well as cross-cutting issues, which will help you in developing a robust and hopefully successful application. And of course, we have Dr. Brian Cahill, who I've met several years before when he was still heading the Marie Curie Alumni Association. He now works at the Leibniz Information Center for Science and Technology as grant manager of the Cost Action. This is CA 19117 on researcher mental health. There you go, Susan. We should invite again Dr. Brian for our mental health series. So we will get in touch with you again, Brian. He is a member of the governing board of Euroscience and was previously chair, as I said, of the Marie Curie Alumni Association. He was a Marie Curie Fellow with research interests focused on measurement techniques for droplet-based microfluids. So Brian is here because he is a seasoned evaluator of MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships and other funding calls. And he will be offering advice from the perspective of an evaluator. So really, thank you so much, Brian. So as I said, this webinar will also include testimonies from successful current and former MSCA PF grant holders who will be introduced by our colleagues a little while later. But for now, may I invite Dr. Branwen Hyde to give her presentation. The room is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And just bear with me for 1 second while I load up my presentation. And I hope everybody can see it now and that it's all very clear. So thank you again for inviting me to participate today. And the idea behind my presentation is to really give you a sense of the policy areas underlying the postdoctoral fellowships under the Mary Skłodowski-Curie actions, and how this will potentially influence the way in which you approach the application. And some of the changes as well from maybe those who have experienced under Horizon 2020, now that we are under Horizon Europe. I did notice that there was a question already in the Q&A about the deadline. The deadline for the postdoctoral fellowships call is the 12th of October, and that is 5 p.m. Brussels time. And that is a very hard 5 p.m. Brussels time. I recommend that you submit early and as often as possible. It is the time on their computers. So if yours says, 5 p.m. For your time, but their computer has already hit 5 p.m., then unfortunately you will be blocked. So again, it's really important that you submit early and often, and try not to wait to the very last minute, though from my own experience, that is usually what happens. But we always advise that that is not the best practice, but we do know what happens in practice very well. So as I said, I'm going to give, because I am based in the UK, I will give a very quick overview of the UK's ability to participate in this call, but I really will be focusing on the policy aims of MSCA Curie and how that relates to the current postdoctoral fellowships, and then some practical tips, which includes many of the cross-cutting areas such as open access and gender, which are becoming increasingly important as part of the development of your proposal. And you will see this reflected in the evaluation criteria. And I'm sure this is something that Brian will also pick up when he's talking about his experience as being an evaluator. So just very, very quickly, hopefully you are all very aware or rest assured about the UK's ability to participate in Horizon Europe. If you would like specific details on that, you can see them here on the slide, which will be made available as well on recording, and you can follow the dedicated links in this. What I wanted to really just to emphasize is that the UK institutions are fully eligible to participate as a host for European fellowships. We are also able to host the incoming phase or the return phase for those who'd be interested in the global fellowships. We are not considered eligible at all to host the outgoing phase of a global fellowship. UK organizations can also host secondments, and as well as the new optional non-academic sector placement that can occur at the very end of your fellowship. And projects with a UK host will not be evaluated any differently by the Commission and the evaluators. My experience is that the evaluators take their job very, very seriously. Most of them have actually been MSCA Curie Fellows or otherwise involved in MSCA Curie actions, and it's something that they are very passionate about. And they really are there to fund the best projects in accordance with the evaluation criteria. And again, there's just some further links for those of you who might have more interest in the UK's participation in Horizon Europe more generally. So really is that I wanted to really focus on MSCA Curie and the policy aims and objectives. And what's one of the big changes between Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe is that there seems to be, particularly in the types of wording that we are seeing with regards to the documentation, a better integration of MSCA Curie across the whole of the Horizon Europe program. Often MSCA Curie was kind of left to the side. It's the part that deals with people and about training, but they're really pushing to fully integrate it across the whole of Horizon Europe. Obviously, it plays a big part of Pillar 1, which is really about reinforcing and extending the excellence of EU science base. So it's really is about training and development of researchers within Europe, and about encouraging researchers also to come to Europe to undertake research either as a long-term career prospect or even just to gain additional experience and expertise, as this is also seen as being really important. Way back, when I first started getting involved in MSCA Curie and FP7, MSCA Curie actually sat in a pillar called the people pillar. And this is still really important to think about and to understand when we're looking at MSCA Curie actions in general, that people and the development of people is really, really important. And you see this when we're talking about the policy aims. So for MSCA Curie as a whole, They're really looking at how do you equip researchers with the necessary skills and, as I said, international experience to be successful, to help to develop new knowledge. And this is not just for the fellows themselves, but how that then integrates across the whole of Horizon Europe. Enhance the skills of people, again, linking back to making sure that researchers have the necessary skills, making sure that the research training is excellent and that individuals are working in really good working conditions. And this will help them to develop, but also to have long-term career employability, which is really important in developing Europe's capacity for research and innovation. Again, it is very much focused on long-term career sustainability, but equally also to support diversity and equal opportunities, and then contributing to EU external policy objectives. Marie Curie is still completely bottom up. It's really up to you to decide what research project or innovation project you want to come up with in any subject area, from archaeology through to zoology. I mean, it really is the gamut. It can be from really fundamental basic research all the way up to something that's very close to market. It's really up to you as the applicant. But from the Marie Curie point of view, they themselves are looking at how they can utilize the knowledge that's being created through Marie Curie to help to influence the EU kind of wider policy objectives. And this is something that the units within the Commission focusing on Marie Curie are themselves looking at doing and supporting in many different ways. And if people are interested in that, drop me an email. I'm happy to go through some of the ways in which that is being done. But how does these Marie Curie as a whole aims, the wider aims of Marie Curie, actually relate to the postdoctoral fellowships call to which you are interested in applying? And hopefully you can see in the way that I presented it here that they really do kind of reflect very clearly within the aims of the postdoctoral fellowships. It's about enhancing the creative and innovative potential. And this is both of the fellow, so the researcher who's applying, but also of their supervisor and the host organization or organizations, if you're thinking about secondments and short visits to which they will be, you will be going to. About fostering excellence, both of, again, the researcher, but also of the research itself. Supporting intersectoral, international, and interdisciplinary mobility. So we call this the 3 I's frequently. So if you are listening to other Marie Curie talks or reading other documents, you'll often see this written as the 3 I approach. It's about acquiring knowledge and transferring knowledge. Again, about long-term career sustainability, supporting the return and reintegration of researchers, including supporting researchers displaced by conflict, and then increasing the impact and the high quality of the research and innovation outputs and really helping to contribute directly to the knowledge-based economy and society. So you can see how these really do reflect between the Marie Curie and the postdoctoral fellowships. And the postdoctoral fellowships have a really important role within the Marie Curie actions. And so I'm thinking about those policy aims and objectives. So what is it that they would like to see in your proposal when you're thinking about putting it together? What they'd like to see, and we're talking about kind of this, what they call expected impact if you're reading the documentation, is what they're hoping for an individual researcher, that you will have an increased set of skills. And this is both research and skills, but any other skills that will help you with your long-term employability and career prospects, wherever you might want to end up with. So that could be in research, it could be outside of research. It's really up to you. There's no defined career path. And this is the nice thing about the Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowships, is that you have time to help think about your career. And one of the key elements that you will need to develop within the first 6 months is this career development plan. And we would encourage you to actually think about it as part of a proposal. It doesn't need to be submitted as part of the proposal itself, but will help you to map out the different kind of skills that you might need thinking about where you want to move forward. It's designed to help you kind of open up and develop new mindsets and approaches. Again, not only for the individual researcher, but for the host organization, increase your networking and communication, and then help you to experience mobility. There's a lot of benefits that actually being a mobile researcher can bring. And I'm sure that the case studies of the current fellows will touch upon this in their own talks. For the organization, again, I mentioned previously that it is about making sure there's good working environment for the researchers, and this is one of the key expected impacts for the host organizations and associated partners who might be involved in your project. Enhancing the quality and the sustainability of research training and supervision. There's a lot of emphasis in Horizon Europe on good supervision. Better transfer of knowledge between sectors and disciplines, and then thinking about how organizations can feed back those research results so they have a direct impact on teaching and education. We've talked about this, they call the knowledge triangle. It's now this kind of knowledge square where you're bringing in society, education, innovation, and research together to really create a cohesive environment and ecosystem. So that's kind of where this sits, and it's really, and you will see as I talk about some practical considerations and the cross-cutting issues, why these policy areas are actually really important when trying to develop your proposal. So one of the key things I want to get through, and I'm sure Brian will also emphasize this, is that the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships are more than just a research project. And hopefully, again, you'll see this when I kind of went through the policy aims. It really is about knowledge exchange, and it's about career development. And the knowledge exchange happens between the fellow and the host and any other partner organizations, associated partners that might be involved. And it's really important that this knowledge exchange is two ways, even if you are a more junior researcher or maybe going to a more a supervisor who maybe has a little bit less experience. The expectation is that knowledge exchange has to be two ways. You as a fellow are bringing something to that research group, something new and exciting that they can benefit from and that host organization that can benefit from, but also that your proposed supervisor and host organization are then also providing you with something exciting and new to help you to develop your career. And when we're thinking about, and when you are thinking about your career development, you need to think about your research skills. So what are the specific research skills that you need to do this project, your proposed Marie Curie project? And then you also need to think about, okay, when my project finishes, what do I want to do? And what are the research skills that I will need to be able to apply and be successful in those posts? So what are the skills that will help you to advance? And then in addition, it's okay, what are those other, sometimes we refer to them as soft skills, but we're talking about those transferable or complementary skills, the skills that you require and you can transfer to your future employment setting. So these could be things like grant writing, finance. I mean, the sky is the limit on these types of things, public engagement. And the project then brings these two elements together. They bring, and we often talk about postdoctoral fellowships as really being training through research. And this is really, really important. Often what we see where people have maybe been less successful is they've really focused on the research element and not the training, or vice versa. They've really focused on the training, but then not focused on the research. And they need to be equal, and they also need to be fully integrated into each other. So it cannot be seen as being two separate things. They need to be fully integrated. And you also need to be bringing together the researcher, your supervisor, your host organization, any associated partners, and anyone else that might be important to the project. For example, if you're going on short visits, or if your project has a specific audience that you might want to be engaging with, again, how do you bring those into your project? And I recognize that this can be quite a tall order since it is, in most cases, just a 2-year fellowship. So we're thinking about kind of the project. We're going to start with the researcher. What you really want to be able to demonstrate as an applicant is your potential to reach and reinforce professional maturity and independence. And this is depending on where you are in your career. Have you just finished your PhD, or are you closer to the 8 years post-PhD level? And what they will expect to see will be very, very different. So as we go through this, and well, you know, when you hear from Brian as well, and from the case studies, hopefully you'll see that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. It really is based on your individual needs in terms of research and training, but also where you are in your career, which will be different than other people. You also need to think about what are your future career prospects? What is it that you want to do when your project is finished? So think about immediately when your project is finished, and then maybe think about time points along the way, 2, 5, 10, 20 years post completion of your fellowship, and think about where you want to be and what you need to do in order to achieve those kind of career aspirations. You need to have very clear scientific and training goals. And you need to be able to clearly demonstrate your experience and competencies and skills based on the evaluation criteria. And again, taking into consideration where you are in your career. They will not expect someone who's just finished a PhD to have the same CV as someone who has 8 years or more experience. I guess so. It's really important that you recognize your own experiences and expertise and think about all the different activities that you have undertaken that can clearly demonstrate them. And then obviously, as I mentioned a few times already, the need for the transfer of knowledge and your ability to transfer knowledge is also really important to be able to demonstrate as the researcher. When we're talking about the project, it's really important to have a very clear research question. And then it's kind of broken down into two sections according to the evaluation criteria, thinking about what if your project is novel. So how is it advancing what we call the state of the art, where things are now scientifically within your research area, whatever that research area might be. And when you're thinking about what is novel versus what is state of the art, thinking about what is any interdisciplinary. So if you are thinking about using different methodologies or different approaches, or secondments or things like that, to really highlight the intersectoral, interdisciplinary opportunities and elements that you are proposing as part of your project. Consider the gender aspects in open science, which I will touch upon a little bit later, and then also think about the scientific impact. What is the positive impact that will result on your research area as a result of this project? What is the impact on related research areas? And I have to I've used science in the European sense, which really covers everything from arts and humanities all the way through to STEM. In addition to having this clear research question and really being able to clearly articulate the novelty versus the state of the art, you need to have very clear and realistic defined research objectives. The research objectives need to clearly link to the methodology, and actually can also link to any areas and questions that may have been proposed during the state of the art section. You can link between the research and training objectives as well. For example, if part of your research objective requires you to learn a certain methodology, again, you could link that to needing a training need because you need to learn those skills for those research methodology. Think about exploitation, dissemination, and communication, which I'll also touch upon shortly. And then think about where these activities will take place and why. And this is particularly important if you are planning on doing any secondments or short visits or having the optional placement at the end. You need to be able to justify why you are doing those activities and where they are taking place. If you can't really justify going on the secondment and you feel it's not very well justified, I can guarantee that the evaluators will also pick up that it's not very well justified and you will be marked lower than if you just didn't include the secondment at all. It really comes about the justifications that you make. In addition, as I said, it really is about training through research. So in addition to having very clear research questions, you also need to have very clear training needs. And as I mentioned, it is about training through research. I will say this a lot because it's really, really critical to the good development of a really solid proposal. So again, thinking about training through research, think about the interdisciplinary and intersectoral experiences, think about your long-term employability. And we call this kind of your personal impact. How will you personally benefit from this project, and what will it enable you to do and help you to achieve going forward? So again, thinking about your career development and the long-term employability, and thinking about the competencies that you will need to be successful as a researcher. So again, about widening your competencies that you already have. Again, as part of your research and your training needs, you need to have realistic and well-defined career advancement objectives. So career objectives, training objectives, whatever you want to call them, but you need to make them very, very clear in your proposal. Again, linking between your research and training objectives, they will be in part based on the needs of your project. So what are the skills, as I already mentioned, that you need to do this project? But they will include transferable skills and then those additional advanced research skills. There will be links between the quality of the supervision and the two-way transfer of knowledge, and this will also help with regards to training. So it's not necessarily that they're just giving you expertise, but they're also providing you, and you might be providing them with training opportunities. And again, thinking about where these activities will take place and why they should take place there is really important. So you can see, hopefully, the way that I've set this up, that there is really clear interlocutor between these two, and they really do mirror each other in the needs and requirements. And because we do get this kind of question quite a lot, so what do we mean when we talk about transferable skills? And this is just a very brief kind of overview of what some of those skills could look like. And there's a couple of documents that you can have a look at through the links that will provide you with a kind of more information on what types of transferable skills and the different competency frameworks that you might find useful in helping to develop these. And as again, they're about transferable and advanced research skills. So again, thinking about training in new techniques, scientific writing, design, gender dimension of research, data management, and also sometimes people forget about things that you can actually use this to learn languages if you need to, particularly if you're doing work in another country and you might actually need to brush up or develop those language skills. And again, you can also use the funding that is available to help you to achieve those and to get those types of courses covered. I do want to mention the role of the supervisor. Often what I have seen, both as my role as NCP, but in previous roles, I'm actually involved in the development and writing of proposals and also the management of Marie Curie grants, is it's often very easy for the supervisor, particularly during this time period where they're often on holiday and leave and taking a much needed break from the hectic time that they have during term time, that these proposals get left with the researcher to actually write. But in order to be successful, those I would highly encourage you to really engage with your supervisor in the full development of the proposal. We have seen, and you might hear this, I don't know if Brian will talk about this, but talking to other evaluators, that it is very clear where the supervisor has been fully engaged in the writing and the development of the proposal. The evaluators look at this as being very positive. They also tend to be much better written. And so again, as I said, the best proposals are those that are generally constructed where the supervisor has really an active role in the development of the proposal. We also get questions about the appropriate level of supervision. How much time should the supervisor be given during the running of the Marie Curie Fellowship? The appropriate level of supervision really depends on the career stages of both parties and the expectation of the project. So there's no correct formula. Someone who's just finished a PhD might need a little bit more supervision than someone who, for example, is at kind of closer to the 8 years post-PhD. So you need to think about what is appropriate for the individual at their career stage. It can be built on an existing collaborative relationship, so you could have known them already, but it could also be a brand new relationship and you'll be working with them for the first time. And again, both of those options are absolutely fine. You just need to think about this in terms of the application and to make the justification. So why is this beneficial? What will change during the course of the fellowship? Thinking again about how the fellow will gain independence and maturity. For those of you who might be considering or already know that they're going to be working with someone who has maybe less experience of a supervisor, that's absolutely fine, but you do really need to justify their involvement. Do not leave anything to the evaluator's imagination or for them to think about by reading between the lines. They won't read between the lines. They've got a lot of proposals to read. If they don't know the answer, if it's not explicitly written, then you unfortunately won't get the justification through, and you're more likely to be marked down a little bit for that. The less experienced supervisors also is an opportunity for them to gain experience of EU funding and of supervising, for them to grow their group and develop their own career. So actually we see this as being a really positive step for maybe those who have less experience supervising. But one of the things is really important for you to talk with your supervisor is to really understand how this relationship will work day to day. What we have seen, unfortunately, through the NCP help desk and a number of questions that this hasn't been clarified either at the proposal stage or even once the project is up and running. And both sides have different expectations of what they expect from either the fellow or from the supervisor. And this can create a lot of tension unfortunately, between both parties. So it's really important that you're quite honest and upfront with your supervisor, and if you are the supervisor, with the fellow about this from day one. And the Marie Curie have actually developed some new guidance on supervision, recognizing the important role that the supervisors play. And I would also encourage all of you to read those, both the fellows and the supervisors and any host organizations as well. I'll now hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview of some things to think about when developing your proposal. And I just now want to touch on the cross-cutting issues. The first one is we often get questions about what do we mean by dissemination, communication, and exploitation. So dissemination is about promotion and raising the awareness of your project results. Exploitation is about how you then use those results, be that for commercial purposes, public policy making, for whatever those would make sense for the results of your project. And then communication is then how do you make your research activity known to the wider society, so beyond the research community. We also get questions of what are results. Results could be products, they could be material, prototypes, software, algorithms, it could be training and advice, services, knowledge, data, methodology, policies, performance, installations. It really depends on your project and what you will be producing in terms of your research and outputs of your research. It's really important that you do have a clear plan for all three of those, for communication, dissemination, and exploitation. And you can then clearly link those types of activities to your training and research objectives and the activities to which you'll be undertaking. As part of your plan, you have to be very explicit about who your targeted audiences and key stakeholders will be, i.e. who needs to know this information and why they need to know it and what you want them to do with this information. Need to think about, for those different people and those different groups of individuals, do they need different activities in order to get the same message across? If so, what are those activities and why do they need those different activities? Some of the activities will be kind of one way, you're just telling them about something. And then you also want to think about those two-way communications where you're getting something back from those groups as well. Again, you can think about achievements, expectations, project activities, and lessons learned. So it doesn't always just have to be about communicating the positives, but you can also talk about some of the things that you've learned that maybe you wish you'd understood going forward, things that haven't worked out as well. And it's also important that we don't just leave these three elements to the very end of the project. They must occur throughout the project's entire lifetime, because also what you'd want to do is get people excited about your research, and you want them to engage with you during the course of your project. And this is an evaluation criteria, and it is evaluated under impact. So again, it is really important that you do address this section, and it's not just thought of, oh, at that very end, I forgot about this and I'm going to shove something in and it's not going to be very well written. It really will make a big difference to the development of your proposal. So it's important that you think about it. As I said, it's evaluated under impact, but you can see it will have clear links to training and research. So it will also be picked up under excellence. So criteria. For this, I mean, so for example, if maybe you're not very good at or have less experience in communicating to the society at large, maybe you might want to do some additional training that will help you to achieve those goals. As part of the communication and dissemination and exploitation, it's really important to understand that the requirement with regards to publication is about, and the requirement for open science and open data practices under Horizon Europe. For those who might be familiar under Horizon 2020, it really is a continuation of that policy, but there are further advances. So there's a few little specific requirements in terms of how you will deal with the intellectual property. You will no longer be able to opt out of the research data management plan. Every project now under Horizon Europe will need to submit a data management plan. The data management plan will need to be managed in line with what they call the FAIR principles. And it doesn't mean that you always have to make all your data open. The idea that it is open as possible, as closed as necessary, depending on your individual project needs, but you still have to have the plan. So again, most universities within Europe will have dedicated teams that will be able to help you understand what these requirements are. And it's important that you understand and you have those conversations during your proposal development. What you don't want to do in your proposal is write it in one way, which then prevents you from doing something else with it a little bit later. Some of them have dedicated teams. Some of those teams sit within the library, but if you're going to an institution that doesn't have a dedicated team, then again, there's a number of resources. And if you contact your Mary Skłodowski-Curie national contact point for the country of which you will be hosted in, they will be able to provide you and guide you to the appropriate documentation. In terms of scientific publications, it is immediate open access via a repository. And at least upon the publication, it must be under an open license. And this includes for monographs as well as for journal articles. This will be increased monitoring compared for those who might have been involved in the Horizon 2020, and it is an evaluation criteria under excellence. So as part of your proposal, you will need to explain how you will meet these open science and open data requirements. And again, you can also link this not only to your research objectives, but to your training objectives. Maybe you don't have a lot of experience doing data management, so this will be an excellent area where you can get additional training, both through your research and need of a research skill, but also a transferable skill thinking about long-term employability. The other area that we're seeing that is also really important to think about is what they call the gender dimension and intersectoral elements of research. For a very long time, I'm sure many of you are probably more familiar with this than I am, but gender has been taken out in a lot of areas. I know this is not in all research areas of research, and there's a large push, and rightly so, to start thinking about this again as part of the research, because it adds a valuable dimension to your research and can really help to take it into a new direction. It can miss things by leaving it out. It can miss also market opportunities. It really helps to ensure excellence and quality of outcomes and enhancing sustainability. And it makes the research outputs and results actually more applicable to society, and society can be more responsive to them. There's some really great websites, which I'll go through very briefly if you are interested in kind of explaining and exploring this in more detail. But the key areas is not just something that you think about at the end. You really need to think about this, and we'd encourage you to think about the gender and intersectionality. And by intersectionality, I mean all those other elements, the social constructs that also play a role. And this is just a little bit of a guideline to help you think whether or not I really need to think about gender, because I can see that, and I know that there'll be some subject areas and this really doesn't apply to me at all. And pretty much if your research now or at any point in the future might touch and be used by humans, then you do need to think about this. And just a few little things to remember about this is that even though you, I'm assuming that most of you are the fellow who is applying, this is actually the supervisor's grant. It is their name. The funding comes to the host organization to be managed by that host organization. It's really important that both the PI, so the supervisor and the fellow, are involved in writing the proposal. As a fellow, you do need to have a strong CV, but this has to be in relationship where you are in your career stage. I cannot emphasize enough the need to read all the call documentation and the evaluation criteria. And by all the call documentation, it is the guide for applicants. It is the MSCA work program. It is the Horizon Europe work programs, the general annexes as well. It's really, really important that you read those and understand those documentation, and do consider any EU policy, relevant EU policies. Obviously, this is still completely bottom up, but it is important to take those into consideration. And I know Brian will touch on this as well, but I also cannot emphasize enough the need to make this as easy as possible for the evaluators to find the information. The evaluators take this very, very seriously, but they are also under incredibly tight deadlines in order to do their work. The evaluations happened within the first term for most academics. Well, for all academics, it's kind of October, November, December time, where they're also balancing all their other duties, so their own research, often teaching as well, and then the evaluation. They will do a kind of roughly about 15 or more proposals within this really, really tight time frame. So please make it as easy as possible. The evaluators will be experts, but not necessarily experts in your area. So you need to use clear and concise language, and please avoid any country or research specific jargon. And then here I've just listed a whole bunch of resources. So this is particularly related to gender, but also where you might want to, I've mentioned the other call documents that I really encourage you to read. And then some additional resources here where some of them are very focused on Horizon 2020 and what was called the individual fellowships then, but the advice and guidance actually remains the same for the postdoctoral fellowships. And that is everything for me, which I think coincides quite nicely because I see Jenny popping up, which I think is her way of encouraging me to speed up a little bit. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them at the appropriate time. I've included the email address for us as NCPs in the UK, and I'm very happy to take any questions directly through to the inbox as well.
Thank you so much, Bradman, and thank you for taking that hint. I didn't need to explain it, so that was wonderful. So a lot of takeaways from that. So do not make the evaluator read between the lines. Be clear and concise. I'm going to give the room to Susan now to maybe facilitate a few questions because we're getting a lot of them.
Yes, we have indeed. Just a few questions. Let us check first. So we have a question from Sean, who I think is based in Malaysia or Singapore, and he has received his PhD in July 2013. So it's exactly 8 years from the year that he received his PhD. He's just wondering if he is still eligible for the postdoc fellowship.
So I'm only hesitating because it's very difficult for me to specifically comment on eligibility in this forum. And the reason I say that is they take the specific days really, really seriously. So just saying July to October 12th actually isn't enough information. I would need to know the exact date in July. I would also need to know any other career breaks that you might have had between now and between that kind of the date in July where you were awarded your PhD and the 12th of October. And it's those specific dates that they will then add up. It's based on the information that you as the applicant provide in Part A. So that's the administrative form, where you actually have to put in the day, month, year for all of your activities. And then in your CV, which they call it, which is in Part B, so the written word template. If you do have any specific question on eligibility, I would highly, highly encourage you and recommend that you directly contact the NCP for the country to which you would be applying, and they'll be able to go through that with you. Just based on July to October, you might or might not. It depends on the exact number of days. So that's why I can't answer that question explicitly. And I'm very sorry that I can't be more explicit. Just say if you want the template, it is on the call document page, or if you start your submission, you can actually download the Word document from there. So that popped up in the chat, so I just took the opportunity.
I think that was a very good answer, because we have this question in multiple variations. So eligibility is a key point, but as you said during your presentation as well, the very first step for any applicant is to identify a European host. So once you have done that, you can then reach out to the NCP network that Brandon just mentioned. NCP meaning National Contact Point, and this is a network of experts that are based in Europe and in fact outside of Europe as well. And Brenwyn, Jenny, and I think Brian are part of this network. So they would then be able to comment on your specific case. You could submit your CV to them and they can look at the details.
It's important if you are submitting the CV, it is day, month, year. I cannot stress that enough, because if you don't send that in, we will just have to email and ask you that again. So
that's a good point. Exactly. Be as specific as possible. So we have another question here. You were talking about how important it is to give the evaluator some form of vision of the career development of the applicant. There's a person here submitted anonymous. When discussing career prospects, is it necessary that this is in the European research area, or would it be perceived negatively if my career path is located outside of Europe? What's your advice?
No, there's not the expectation that at the end of your fellowship you would stay in Europe. There's benefit to international mobility and coming and spending that time within Europe, but there's no expectation that you would stay. So if your career prospect would be to return to your home country and set up a research group there, or go into policy or public engagement, or whatever it is that you want to do, or even in a totally different country, then that's fine. What you need to be clear in your proposal is how this project will help you to achieve that, why you need to do it in Europe, right? What you will gain by doing it here at this time, not in 5 years from now, not 5 years ago, and then how that will help you.
Thanks, Branwen. And maybe a third question on the issue of gender and diversity. You already mentioned it in your presentation. There's a question from Stefan, who I think is based in Germany. He is wondering about specifically the diversity aspect in section 1.2, which is excellence. He says, my research is technical and has no gender or diversity aspect. However, he has, first of all, done work and outreach related to diversity and gender before, and he plans to continue this in the host organization. also, the host organization that he has chosen is quite diverse in terms of the gender and the background. Is this worth mentioning, and would he include it in section 1.2, or would he include this only in the CV?
So I'm gonna say everything. So it's great, and I think all of it needs to be highlighted. So when he's thinking about the host environments, when he's talking about implementation, why he's choosing that host organization, then he would explain that actually is a very diverse. They take these issues very seriously, and he would talk about that there. Also, for those who are being very practical, in part A, the admin forms, you also need to include the gender of the team that you'll be working within. And by gender, they also include LGBTQI. So it's not just male or female. They are really opening and being more open to the fluidity of what we consider to be the construct of gender. In terms of the outreach, so the dissemination, communication, and exploitation, and those other activities, then again, he would talk about the diversity and the things that he's done, how he wants to expand on that within the communication, the dissemination, and exploitation. Obviously, it would go in his CV, so that would also fall under excellence and how he is an excellent researcher and is taking these into consideration. He might find that as part of his training, though he feels very confident, you might say very competent in those areas. Actually, you could still think that there might be additional training or support that you might actually want to help you to advance those skills. So that could go into your training skills. In terms of your fundamental research, I do recognize there are certain areas where there isn't any gender to be considered, but then you'd need to explain why you feel that there isn't any gender to be considered. I know in a lot of technical areas, people do perceive this. I used to work in a research group that was really heavily on engineering and ICT. But even there, actually, there is gender. If you're developing a new piece of software or a new piece of hardware or some sort of kit that needs to be used by different groups of people, then there is a gender and intersectoral element on how that should be put together or how that would be used. And a really good example is the iPhone. When the new iPhone came out, it was very big. And actually, for smaller people, it didn't fit in the hand very well because they actually hadn't thought about who was going to be using this and the user needs. For the wide group, they just thought of the average size. My understanding was the average size man, but average size person, and it fit their hand. It didn't fit the smaller people's hands. So though you might be in a technical element, in a technical project, there might be these considerations that could be brought up, or and it might not be specifically your project right now because you really are looking at the coding, but it could be something that people would want to be exploiting and that they would need to think about in exploitation. And you could talk about that as part of the novel and state of the art and how you'd be advancing it. So there is still ways that you can bring this in, but if you really truly believe and can really that there is no gender element to your research, do not leave it out because that will be the assumption will be that you didn't think about it. You need to demonstrate that you thought about it and you can clearly say, this really does not pertain to me in this context, but this is how I'm going to be approaching it throughout the rest of the. Sorry, I realized that was a very long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully I've covered all the questions that came through about gender.
Good, Jenny. If you allow maybe one final question before we proceed. There's a question from Emilia, and Emilia was, of course, paying attention to what you said about the secondments and how important it is to make a very strong point on why this secondment is, useful in the context of the application. Emilia is wondering whether you could explain how to describe a placement within the proposal. What type of activities could be included for the placement in order to distinguish them from the secondments, not to make them look the same. Do you have any advice here?
So just to say that the placement can only take place at the end of the project. It cannot take place at any other time. And that's one of the key differences between a secondment and a placement. Secondments can take place any time of the project. Secondments can also take place anywhere. So they could be in a third country or in an EU member state and can be in any sector. Whereas the optional placement can only take place in an EU member state or a Horizon Europe associated country, and they have to be in the non-academic sector. So those are really the defining differences between the two. There's also a question about length. Most secondments will be a few months. The placement can be up to 6 months at the very end of the project. I will be quite frank, other than that, there is really no difference between the secondment and a placement. but they have to call them different things in order for the rules, the funding rules, to work. So that's why they're called different things. And then also those two other real clear elements, which is it's a non-academic sector and it has to be in an EU member state or an associated country for the placement to take place. Now, this is the first year where they've ever included the placement. So we're also looking forward to hearing how these things are evaluated and what the comments come back from the evaluators on this. We've been to a few training sessions with the Marie Curie unit on what are the difference. And they're even less clear than I think I just was on the difference. So I think, unfortunately, we will have to see. But really, there is no real difference. It's a name to allow the rules to be applied differently for the placement, and then those two specific rules about the location of where the placement can take place.
Thank you. I think we have lots and lots of questions that are coming in here. I just maybe at this point wanted to quickly say we are having a second session. Brenwyn and Brian have kindly agreed to come in for an additional question on the 12th of August at 9 o'clock European Summer Time, which is 3 o'clock in Singapore. Sorry, Tomasz and Judith, I don't know the times in Japan and Korea at the top of my head, but this will be a Facebook live session and only questions. So don't worry. We will, of course, try to go through as many questions as we can today. But if we don't have time, please come back on the 12th. And then there'll be only questions and answers for you. So maybe, Jenny, I'll hand back to you for the time being.
Yes. Thank you so much, Susanna. Thank you, Branwyn. So Branwyn will stay for a while I give the room to Brian. So Brian, so let's take, maybe let's imagine that you already are ready for your proposal. Now let's take it from the perspective of an evaluator. So here are some tips and tricks for a winning proposal. Brian, the room is yours.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Jenny, and thanks for Brandon for the very, very thorough examination of the Marie Curie Postdoctoral Fellowship. I am working at the Learning and Skills Analytics Group at the Technische Informationsbibliothek. That's a national library of technology, a university library, but also a research institute in Hanover in Germany. That I will very, very quickly describe my own kind of research mobility. I studied in Dublin and Ireland. I studied engineering, and I first moved to Germany in kind of 1998, where I worked in industry at Hewlett Packard. And from there, after 2 years, I moved to do PhD in nanotechnology in Zurich, postdoc in chemistry in Geneva. And then after almost 10 years away from Ireland, I became a Marie Curie Fellow at the Institute for Bioprocess and Analytical Measurement Techniques in Heiligenstadt in Germany. It's a small institute in Thüringen, and then I became a group leader at the same institute. In 2018, I became a project manager at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm now working at the TIB in Hanover. So I've moved to several countries. In a voluntary capacity, I was chair of MSCA's German chapter, and also of the Marie Curie Alumni Association itself, and a board member of Euroscience, and also of SciLink, which is a foundation in the Netherlands that provides transferable skills training, and is based on a Marie Curie ITN in the field of human resources management. That I will kind of talk about my experience as an evaluator, and kind of give you some tips about how you can submit your proposal and prepare your proposal. You should give yourself plenty of time to write your proposal. So I think most people take about 3 months. And this is very necessary because it's not just writing the proposal, it's also communicating with your host institution, finding a host institution to begin with, to talk to your supervisor, but also support services within the host institution, so that you may not have visited this place and this country and this institution. So you really need help to find out what is available and which support is available and what the wider context of the proposal. You should read the call text and guide for applicants very carefully. that we have provided a link to the call text, and that all of this information is very important. That the postdoctoral fellowship is very highly focused on the fellow, so that you should show that you are worth investing in, and that that all of the content of the proposal is focused on kind of your background, how that fits with the host institution, and how you will benefit from getting the fellowship, but also what you will contribute to the host institution through transfer of knowledge. That you should ask many people for feedback, particularly your PI. And I think, as Brandon said very, very clearly, that if your PI is less involved in preparing your proposal, that this will, that the reviewers may not say this, but it may be clear through one part based on the research part, based on your background being very highly developed and very understandable, and the part that is kind of what the PI will contribute being less well developed and less understandable, less clear for the reviewers. And this is, I will talk about this a little bit later again. And you should ask people who have kind of less direct experience of your research topic, maybe scientists who read your proposal, and to give you feedback, because they may pick up on exactly the same issues that the evaluators will have. And sometimes the evaluators have some knowledge of the, well, they're definitely within the discipline, but may not have very much direct knowledge of your particular research focus. And you should talk to the EU grant support office at your host institution, because they can be hugely helpful. Firstly, kind of how you become an evaluator. That to become an evaluator, it's in the same kind of funding and tenders portal that you will use to submit your proposal. That one of the links on the funding and tenders portal is towards, it kind of brings you to an expert area, and you basically can kind of put your CV, your publications, your kind of experience in industry, in academia, everything to do is like LinkedIn for, and kind of this is what the Commission uses to choose evaluators, not just for the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, but also for very many other funding and tenders evaluation needs that the European Union has. And that this is something that is worth doing, because they pick people with all sorts of backgrounds, whether it's in academia or in industry. And going forward, kind of that, kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 years, you may be picked. It may not be the first year that you have this all your data input that you will choose you, but eventually they may come around to picking somebody, because they have a lot of, particularly in Horizon Europe coming up, there will be a lot of proposals to review, and they will need a lot of experts. So I will give you some information about the evaluation process. That this is from the evaluation step-by-step manual for evaluators from 2018 that is available from the link that I give here. And that this shows kind of basically the time frame for evaluating proposals. Previously, the calls closed in the middle of September, and that evaluators were contacted around now, so about a month and a half or 2 months before the call closed, whether they are available. And then kind of once the call closes, that within 1.5 weeks, eligibility is checked, and then within another week that evaluators are chosen. This is very, very quick, and that the research executives, the REA does a tremendous job to kind of do this so quickly. But by doing it very quickly, it may mean that the experts are not always kind of very, I mean, that it's something that once you, as an expert, you get 10 proposals to accept, that the pressure is to accept everything, because there is no time to find more evaluators, because everybody is under a very, very strict time frame for delivering kind of all of the aspects of the evaluation. So by the end of September, so within 2-3 weeks, that all of the evaluators have accepted, and then the evaluation begins. First, you are given a briefing on how to evaluate proposals, and this is mainly what's in the manual that I give the link to. And there is also a video guide and kind of questions. You do a small exam where they check that you have actually read the manual and that you are on point for everything that's there. Then you have about a week to read all the proposals, and then another week to deliver your first set of individual evaluation reports. The individual evaluation report is shown in blue, and each of 3 reviewers or evaluators writes their own report and submits this. And so the first, this is done in 3 lots with 3 deadlines. First, you have to deliver 20%, then 40%, and then 40%. And so this is quite intensive. If you have kind of 10 proposals, you have to do 2 the first week, 4 the second week, 4 for the third week. And that this means that you do these, each proposal should take 4 hours. This is you're paid as a reviewer, and this is kind of calculated to be 4 hours work. And this is mainly done kind of after your working hours, because it's not your daily work. So you very often do it after the kids go to bed, and kind of so to work on one proposal in one evening. And this is something that is quite intensive. And so once this is done, you move on to the consensus report phase. And this allows any disagreement between the evaluators, and there is often disagreement, to be ironed out. That you basically, that one of the evaluators becomes the rapporteur, and they write a consensus report, which is then given to the other evaluators to approve and to edit. And so there's a lot of work and discussion at this stage to improve the evaluation. And then each of the evaluators has to approve this and to agree on an overall kind of evaluation number for each each proposal. After that, I wasn't involved as vice chair, and the vice chairs and kind of on panels kind of do some quality control afterwards. So this means that I think over kind of the time frame between kind of the 15th of September and then kind of beginning of December, that most of the work was done in kind of evaluating most of the proposals. And I presume that in the next 2 months that there was a lot of work to do to make sure that everything was okay. So I think that the REA does a great job, but it takes about 3.5 months to do all of the evaluation before you get results. I will talk a little bit about the evaluation criteria that here this is given in the guide for applicants, and this gives the general criteria for evaluation for excellence, impact, and implementation. So excellence gets 50%, impact gets 30%, and implementation gets 20%. And that the first kind of thing that most reviewers kind of review is the excellence, because it's the first on the list. And it's also the reason why you're chosen to review the proposal, because of your disciplinary background. But this is not the only thing. That's just only 50% of the marks. So all of the other kind of impact and implementation are another 50%. So I think that this is something that is broken down in the manual into further points. So the manual for evaluators in Horizon Europe is not yet available, but as you see here, that the evaluators are guided to evaluate by answering specific questions. Kind of are the state of the art, specific objectives, and an overview of the action provided and relevant. So in many ways, this is kind of a box ticking exercise where you kind of look at these questions and you answer them in the context of the proposal before you. And so if something isn't provided or isn't credible, this is where the reviewers can write a negative point in their review. So I won't go through all of these very, very in detail, but I think this is something that you can look at yourself when you're writing the proposal and kind of structuring it. And I will go through some of the evaluator comments, and kind of that here is for excellence, and kind of I kind of highlight in bold many of the points where it is kind of positively or negatively evaluated. And you can see what the evaluators like is when the proposal is clear, well described, clearly demonstrated, high quality, that the supervisor is a top-level scientific manager. It doesn't, I think one of the questions that came was whether they have to be a very, very famous or prominent scientist. No, I think that they have to be top level. They have to be a good scientific manager who is dedicating time to the research. I think this is that the hosting environment is ideal. Whereas when the negative comments, it's when something is originality and innovative aspects are not sufficiently demonstrated, or unclear and insufficiently substantiated, not sufficiently integrated. So lack of clarity is the thing that most reviewers don't like. Is when they don't understand something, when they have to spend more time at the proposal to understand it, when they have to go to references, or when they have to search for literature themselves to understand what's in the proposal. So I think that this is something that when something is not sufficiently discussed or is not clear for training objectives. So if you leave something out, the reviewers will notice. If you kind of focus more on one point than on the other point, the reviewer may mark kind of the more research oriented aspects positively, but if you kind of completely leave out something else, that this will be noticed. That this for impact, that this is when the positive impact on the researcher's career is convincingly argued. So this is not about whether it will have a positive impact. This is kind of considered compulsory, but that you have to argue and kind of show that it will have a positive impact, that dissemination is properly conceived. And a lot of this is just being there, just arguing something, just making sure that that you properly address issues rather than do it excellently. Sometimes you just have to get it done. And if the career strategy is not elaborated in detail, this means that you will be marked down. That there is another file I have listed under the link, and this gives many evaluator comments, because one way of doing it is to write your own proposal, and then once you have written your own proposal, to get evaluation comments. But you can read other people's evaluator comments. You can learn from those, and you can get feedback, and you can learn what reviewers look at. And this is a very extensive document of reviewer comments from Marie Skłodowska reactions. So for the implementation, very often that many researchers put a lot of time into excellence, a lot of time into impact, and then for implementation, they let themselves down. That's kind of, there are gaps in the Gantt chart, there are kind of things that don't make sense, things left out, say risk assessment, which is normally very generic, but if it's just not there, you will get marked down, and a red mark on risk assessment can be the difference between getting the fellowship and not getting it. So you have to go through kind of all of this stuff and to make sure that it makes sense, because this may be the first proposal of this type that you've ever written. And it is quite easy to make mistakes on stuff which is relatively easy to get right once you put time and effort into it. And so if you have a poorly designed Gantt chart or kind of tasks and resources that have not been properly detailed, so you should do this in a way that it is compact but complete and makes sense. So evaluators are paid for 4 hours work to evaluate one proposal. And kind of we generally have 5 to 15 proposals to review in 3 to 4 weeks. That when you're doing it for the first or second time, the vice chair gives you a lot of feedback on the first proposals you write. And there's a lot of control in the way that it's done. But the evaluators are chosen based on keywords on the database, and kind of much of this is automated. And very often your evaluator is not an expert on your specific research topic, particularly when this is interdisciplinary, that they may be kind of an expert from one of the disciplines and not from one of the others. So that personally, I'm an engineer who worked in microfluidics with kind of applications in biology, chemistry, material science. So you get to a point where you have a lot of knowledge, but you're kind of, in English, you say jack of all trades and master of none. So this means that you don't always have deep knowledge. So as a reviewer, you're constantly learning new research through reading proposals. And that what you need to do is, particularly if you have interdisciplinary research, is that you have to, very often you have your research background, your host has another research background. You have to get a lot of feedback from your host, whether that makes scientific sense, because if it doesn't, that the reviewers will notice, this is the first thing they will notice, that kind of the proposal doesn't make as much sense as they would like. That the evaluator wants to see you demonstrating that you're the expert and that you're communicating the novelty and relevance of your work very clearly. And if you're not the expert, this is a training fellowship so that you can build kind of any gaps in your background into your training program. Make it easy for the evaluators. You should make your text interesting and easy to read. You should have your English checked before submitting. It's not kind of that all of your grammar should be 100% correct. I mean, if there are a couple of small errors, this is not a huge problem, but that everything makes sense, that it reads well, that the reviewers can understand what you mean. That you should be sparing with references because they take up a lot of space. And evaluators often don't read references unless they have problems understanding the proposal. So you should choose only the most important and educative references. You can use bold, italic, and underline to highlight important points. Maybe you shouldn't overdo that, but it can help if you do it in kind of a way that is logical and consistent. That you can demonstrate that your chosen host and mentor will provide the right environment for you to be successful and for training, for science communication, all of the elements that Branwen has mentioned before, and be very specific about the supervisor and host institution and external partners, so that kind of you should say exactly why these are the best partners for you to develop your project, and that you get access to infrastructure, intellectual property support, training, speaking at institutional seminars, integration within the institution, and so on. That first pages of your proposal should be exciting, that we should get an idea why this is important research and kind of what contributions you're going to make. And this is something that we're curious and excited, and we kind of believe in your proposal. You should cover all the criteria in the proposal template. That a poorly structured proposal is quite difficult to understand, and that you should try to structure a proposal in a way that the reviewers can kind of tick every box on the kind of the list of questions that they have to answer, so that they write a good review. You shouldn't waste space on anything that's irrelevant, and kind of that graphics take up a lot of space, but often they can illustrate concepts much more clearly than words. But of course, just certain kind of space limitation. But if there is something that can only be described in a graphic, particularly something technical, I think this is quite can be very, very useful. Get the layout and readability right, because a proposal that looks well will probably be easier to review. Receiving the results of your proposal. If the proposal is accepted, you proceed to grant agreement. If it's not funded, there are many other opportunities to make a career in research. I think that the chances are 10 to 15% to get this funding, because it's at the career stage, and also the attractiveness of having an independent research project at the postdoc phase is quite attractive for many people. If the proposal is not funded, you can, depending on the marks you get, that you can resubmit and learn from the negative comments. I include here a kind of a link to a blog by Shannon Jantz, where she published an unsuccessful submission that she resubmitted successfully the year after. That there are also alternative routes to funding through the widening fellowships and the Seal of Excellence programs, depending on the country and region and university that you apply to. And I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Brian. So now you know from the perspective of an evaluator what they're looking at. So I think one common theme is really like you have to make it clear and concise. You know, you can't allow, as what Brandon was saying, these evaluators to read between the lines. So I'm going to bring back Susanna to ask the question. Susanna, are you here?
I am here indeed. Yes. Sorry,
Yes,
we're all just typing away in the background because there's so many questions. We already answered 127. So you are obviously all very keen, which is fantastic for us to hear. We have a lot of questions that repeat themselves, and maybe I'll start off with one which comes in different forms. Of course, I mean, we've heard from you how important it is to find a supervisor. We've heard how important it is to very clearly give the evaluator an idea about your career progression with the help of this fellowship. Now, people are wondering how to find a good topic. And of course, the answer is you will know what's hot. But maybe, Brian, you have some general advice. Where should people look for inspiration to make sure that their proposal is relevant?
I think I would probably start with the two-way transfer of knowledge, because you have to show kind of from your research background how you will transfer knowledge to your host institution and what you will learn from your host institution. So I think very often this is some sort of mixture of your previous research and research in the institution that you're moving to. I think this is quite logical, and I think it makes sense to many evaluators, because it means that you contribute something based on evidence from your previous experience, but this is combined with new experiences, maybe new access to infrastructure at the host institution. So I think very often this is the most conventional way to find the topic.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's a good answer. But I guess it also helps to have a general idea of what Europe is concerned with. So to kind of keep reading a little bit, keeping an eye on the news and kind of what Europe is trying to achieve with the big funding program that they've just launched, and trying to somehow find a link to your own research. I think that probably won't go in this.
This can also be linked to your career progression afterwards, because I think you have to look to see which research fields are becoming more important, and to find a way to fit in with the the more general trends and also the policy initiatives.
Thank you, Brian. And maybe just to emphasize again, this is a bottom-up fellowship, which means because someone was asking for the predefined topics, and there are no predefined topics. This is up to you to identify the research topic that you want to work on and to convince the evaluator and the funder why you are a worthwhile candidate for this fellowship. Maybe some other questions. We had someone who is asking about the evaluators. How many evaluators are reviewing each application, and is there some form of average score?
That there are 3 evaluators working on each proposal, and each kind of general kind of area has a vice chair, who is responsible for advising these evaluators and also for quality control. So, but I think that we have kind of the 3 individual evaluation reports, and then through a kind of consensus that these evaluators agree to condense their reports into one report. So this means that there's a lot of, that if one of the reviewers is completely wrong, that this can be pointed out in discussions, and that generally, but in my experience, it has always been quite congenial to deal with the other evaluators. I hear that kind of in other fields that it can be quite tough to deal with kind of the disagreements, and there's a lot more argumentation, but I've never experienced this. That it's always been very topical and focused on the proposal.
Thank you, Brian. Now we have a lot of questions that are very technical. Maybe we just answer one question before we go into the technical aspects. Maybe Jenny, you can answer this. We have a question that comes up again and again. How do I find a potential host? And maybe this is a question where you can shed some light for those of you that haven't identified a host just yet.
I mean, right now there are a lot of offers, you know, online from countries with, you know, institutions that would like to have you as a potential postdoc. So I mean, in my case, like I really just wrote to those professors who have the same line of you know, interest as I did, and thankfully they were also connected to, you know, they had experience also with the Marie Curie. So I think that's one of the things you have to, you know, spend time, a little bit of time sitting down, and then you know, the things that the professors, for example, that you read about, because you do a lot of research already, I'm sure, and you encounter all these names. I can say like most of them are either inside the Marie Curie network or would like to, you know, be part of the Marie Curie network, you know, to do this research. And usually, you know, professors are looking for you as well. So it's also great if you attend like these virtual, you know, conferences that are there right now. There are a lot now on Hopin and in other platforms like this one. You know, who knows? You know, Brian and Branwen might be. I mean, for sure, no, you know, potential hosts and potential professors who can write the proposal with you. So there are a lot of entry points for that. And I remember, Brian, when we met during the MCAA, you touched upon this because there were those who were doing their ITN who want to do a postdoc. So the ITN is, of course, the doctoral network, and they want to do the postdoc. And I think you gave a very nice, you know, a very nice advice, and it was really just get to know people, open up, you know, get to like talk to people. And I think this is something that we miss.
Thank you, Jenny. Maybe if I just quickly share our screen, because we have this really amazing platform where you can choose from over, I think, 300 hosting offers that
341, yeah,
published here. And if you just go to the euraxis.ec.europa.eu website, this is the Euraxis homepage, and you will find, if you look on jobs and funding, you click over to find hosting, and you will see that we currently have 347 hosting offers. So for all of you that have not identified someone just yet, this might be a first entry point. But as Jenny said, and Brian and Brenwyn will confirm, it's important to use your personal network. And this also answers a lot of the questions that we keep receiving. Should I have a secondment? How do I identify a placement? This is something that you need to develop together with your supervisor to get his or her advice on how you should build this into your proposal. Now, as I said, we have a lot of technical questions. Maybe we take 2 or 3 of these questions. And something that is very current, of course, is the COVID situation. We have a few participants that are asking, and this is related to the mobility rule. Maybe when you answer this question, Brian, you can just quickly summarize the mobility rule. Here's an applicant that says, I have initially worked offsite from my home country due to the COVID-19 situation, but I later physically joined the European institution, amounting to 12 months till or before the application deadline. How does that gel with the mobility rule?
The mobility rule is that you must have worked at most 12 months out of the last 36 months in the country of the host institution. So apart from the global fellowship, where it's a little bit different, but I think this is something, it's often not clear from the question, and kind of exactly, I think in this case that I think during the pandemic, many people have had maybe working in one country, officially working in one country, but actually being residents in another and living there and kind of working from home. So I'm not sure how that's dealt with, but I can, this is something that I think I would send to an NCP. I don't know if Brandwin probably is closer to giving advice on that.
Yeah, if you don't mind, this has been I wouldn't say #1 question to the NCP help desk, but it has been a very one of the top questions. And unfortunately, the Commission has been very clear. You would not be eligible in either country. So they've made this very clear under Horizon Europe, because you have been undergoing your main activity. So it's not just about physical location, but your main activity in your European host country for more than 12 months, and as Brian said, in the 36 months immediately for the call deadline, you would not be eligible to apply for a Marie Curie Fellowship within that European country. And then, as you've also been physically resident in your current country for more than 12 months in the last 36 months, immediately before the call deadline, you would also not be eligible to apply with them. So that would be, for example, if you wanted to go on the global fellowship, you could not have the outgoing phase to that country. So this has been very clear from the Commission for this call. Unfortunately, for those who might have applied for the Horizon 2020 call, the last call in 2020 under Horizon 2020, there was a more flexibility with regards to the mobility rule as a result of COVID, but they have tightened that up now for this call. So I'm really, really sorry, but that is now a very clear rule from the Commission. And lots of NCPs have asked just in case, and we all got the same answer. So.
Thank you, Brandwin. Jenny, looking at the time, shall we perhaps progress first and then take the technical questions later?
Yes, thank you so much, Susanna. So now I'd like to give the floor to Tomasz, who will introduce our first fellow, and then later on we will ask also Judith to introduce the next fellow. Tomasz, please.
Thank you very much, Jenny. It is my great pleasure and honor to invite Dr. Paweł Sikora to our webinar. Dr. Sikora entered the Marie Skłodowska Reactions community through an MSCA individual fellowship at the Technical University of Berlin. He specializes in 3D printing of lightweight concrete, which is under civil engineering. Before that, he was part of the international team that involved Korean researchers and Korean universities. So Korea is close to his heart, and Dr. Sikora is close to Korea. Without any further delay, Paweł, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm very delighted to see that more than 400 people is here. So that's really nice. And I would like to show my presentation to give you a little bit information on my project or on my perspective when I was preparing my my proposal. And what I also found out that it's pretty overlapping with what our previous speakers said. That's mean I was thinking the same way, and I was successful. So I really recommend you then to listen to the comments or the recommendations of our previous speakers. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about my ultralight con 3D project. So actually, before I start my presentation, I will already mention that also, let's say, the abbreviation or the short name of the project should be catchy. So this is, let's say, the first comment even before I start talking a little bit more about my project. So who am I? I'm originally from Poland. I was teaching in Poland, and then I moved firstly to do my postdoc in Germany. And then actually during my stay in Germany, obviously I met this 12 months mobility rule. I have applied for my Marie Curie individual fellowship, because that time it was called individual fellowship because it was done under Horizon 2020. And this is also information for potential fellows, actually, that it's not bad, because some people asked me before, is it okay to work with your supervisor before? So I have actually used this in my proposal, that I have already made some, let's say, background or some preliminary studies. So some people are afraid to mention that they did some preliminary studies, but I use this in my proposal as a, let's say, as a strong point, that I actually know my supervisor, and I have made some, let's say, foundation for my research. So yeah, just a little bit about my project. So my project was done at TU Berlin. It was related to 3D printing of the ultra lightweight concrete. So let's say this sustainability goals of European Union, and it was done together with industrial partner. So my second-man partner, MSCA Switzerland. You can check the website of my project if you are interested. You can find out what I have done during my stay. So I divided my presentation into, let's say, 4 main steps, or yeah. So it's kind of a structure. I wanted to present you how to or give you my comments how to prepare your proposal. So. Before writing, this is very important actually to really take, yes, also Brian said about these 3 months. This is obviously, doesn't have to be exactly 3 months, but it really takes a lot of time to write it. This is a little bit different than the typical proposals. Let's say these only oriented on the excellence, which we have in our, let's say, countries, those which are like fully focused on the science. So it really takes 3 months, because you need to think about the impact, about the implementation. So you have to really develop the entire idea in your head at the beginning. And I really recommend you to know how the project will end up. So not to start writing without knowing how it will end up, because at the end you will find out it will not solve out so easy, because there are so many, let's say, requirements you have to fill in your proposal. And I also recommend you to attend webinars, not because we are here and I have to do it, but you can always find some extra knowledge from every webinar, from every, every person can give you, let's say, one extra sentence, one extra point to your proposal. And this is also what's also highlighted by the previous speakers. It is really important to know your supervisor. I really recommend that. Obviously, you don't have to do it. You can apply. But from my perspective, I know that it was very helpful that I knew my supervisor before. And I was sure that he will support me. And this is also important to know if possible, obviously, to know the team before. Because at the end, you will spend 2 years there. So it's really to have this idea how the group will behave, how you fit in the group. Maybe you don't feel yourself comfortable. So I really recommend you to try to somehow contact your supervisor before. Nowadays it is a little bit more difficult because of COVID, but try to maybe meet at the conference. This is what a lot of people did. They met their supervisor at the conference, or maybe you can also go for the, let's say, short scholarship to try to visit your supervisor, just to have this idea how the department look like. Also, the joint publication would be a great thing. For myself, I also use it in my proposal, that we have already published something. So don't be, let's say, don't hide this. This can be also a strong point that you did already some publications with your potential supervisor. So
I'm so sorry, but I must rush you. We are way behind the schedule. If you can keep the most important things, because it's quite late here. Thank you.
All right. So about industrial cooperation, try to find, if possible, to show that the industry, at least in civil engineering, this is important, to show that the industry is interested in your topic. I guess this could be a strong point. So this is the comment I got from reviewers. Then I really recommend you, this was also mentioned before, to contact a national contact point, EU office, and also send your proposal to English correction service. It has to be written nice, it has to go smooth, and really listen to the people who are not expert in your field. So you can also ask your girlfriend, wife, friends to check it, because they are non-experts. They can give you a good comments. And this actually connects with the last comment here. So reviewer is a human being. He will be tired. So make it easy for him to understand. Then we go to a proposal preparation. So this was also said by Brian. Please take care of every word, because theoretically it's 10 pages, but you will find out it's not enough. So please address every aspect, at least with one sentence, like gender equality. Try to put everything in sight, because otherwise somebody can mention, you didn't fulfill the requirements, and the competition is very strong. And what I also recommend you to use your CV as a part of the proposal. So this is not just a CV just to put it, but you can actually put a lot of information, extra information, so you can support your proposal with your CV to show the links to your websites, to show the conferences, activities, memberships. So this can really show the reviewer that you are a good potential fellow. Then this was also said before, the excellence part is only 50%. And keep this in mind. This is not standard scientific proposal. 50% is impact and implementation. And this was very difficult for me. I never did it before. So it was a big challenge for me to write impact and implementation, actually much more than writing the excellence part. Because with excellence, we kind of know what we want to do. But with this, you have to really focus. And then it's also important at the end to sum it up. It is who you want to become. It's not only the science, but also who you will become at the end of your fellowship. Then writing the proposal. So I really recommend you to start your proposal to put your research into the context. So use various documents like United Nations policy context, Sustainable Development Goals, European Union, to show the reviewer that you are familiar with the documents, that you know how your research fit in to the society. And then try to also bold something to make reviewer eyes to go through, to make him look through your proposal much more easier. So maybe you can kind of lead the reviewer on the most important aspects of your proposal. And this is again, show that you know why your project is important according to various guidelines and various programs, European Union Green Deal, and so on. And then also try to put as much as possible of images. This is my recommendation, because you can tell much more with images. You can show the structure of your project, the main idea. This will be very helpful to reviewer to have this first idea on your proposal. Yes, and then again, please use your previous experience. Don't be, say, ashamed or shy or whatever. Just show it that you have really good background, that you are starting, and you are, let's say, 80% of your capacity. And thanks to this project, you will get to 100%. And regarding interdisciplinarity, this was also a question. It's, for me, at least, it does not have to be within the fields. You can show interdisciplinary within your own field, that you shift from nanotechnology to polymer, or you combine it. This is also, at least for me, I used it as interdisciplinarity. And then the project activities. This is also important. It is only 2 years, so be realistic. 3 publications is enough. Don't put 20 publications. Also, I also recommend you to put your secondment early. That was actually the negative comment I got, that my secondment was done in the last part of my project. And then this is also what Brian said. Good management and risk management strategy. This is very important to show that you also know how to manage your project, that you are capable to conduct your project. And this really helped me during the COVID, actually, that I have developed this good risk management strategy. So I hope, Tomasz, I have satisfied you with the speed of my presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me by email or on Twitter or on LinkedIn. So I'm open for your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paweł, for a short but very informative, in a nutshell, presentation. And thank you for being available for further questions. Is it okay to share your slides? We got this question already.
Yes. I will upload them maybe to Zenodo if you are interested, or we can send it directly. Thank you.
Just to save time, I would like to pass the floor to Judith, who will introduce our next speaker. Judith, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tomasz. And again, a very warm welcome to those of you who are in our webinar. Thank you for coming, and apologies for slightly going over time. Let me just introduce our last speaker today, Dr. János Kriston Vizi, who is a group leader at the Bioinformatics Image Core, Bionic, at the MRC Laboratory for Molecular Cell Biology at the University College London. He's a former Marie Curie International Reintegration Fellow, and he was a founding member and chair of the Marie Curie Alumni Association Grants and Awards Working Group. He is responsible at the moment for the high throughput bioimage processing and data analysis for cell biology projects. His research interest led him to several years-long projects at Kyoto University in Japan, and also the A-Star Bioinformatics Institute in Singapore. So János, if you could please share your slides.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation and nice introduction you did. And thank you for having me. I would like to go very briefly and just emphasize the main point of my experience as a Marie Curie Fellow. So currently I'm a group leader at University College London. Originally, I started from Hungary, where I was born. And yes, I didn't put up a world map for my mobility tracking, but yes, from Hungary, I went to Japan, Kyoto University, and I got actually 2 scholarships there. First, a Monbusho one, and after graduating PhD, I got a JSPS scholarship as well. It's my first postdoc. I put it here. This is not Kyoto University building. This is Kiyomizu-dera Shrine, which is nicer than Kyoto University building. Then I went to Singapore for my second postdoc at A-Star Bioinformatics Institute, and then to UCL as my third postdoc as an MRC Medical Research Council Fellow. And I applied to Marie Curie scholarship over there. So I already had my salary paid by MRC, and Marie Curie, I only applied for research costings. A few, yes, images about my research. So it's about high content analysis, which is practically quantification, so image processing of microscopic images in high content screening. Some of you, it might be familiar, a lot of confocal cellular images that must be analyzed by computers because it's so many images, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. It's simply impossible to assess manually. So we have to write code and analyze it. And this is practically what I'm doing. I would like to highlight just the main bullet points of my experience as applying to Marie Curie. The far most important points, as other speakers nicely emphasized, is to contact and have a good connection with your supervisor. So I didn't only have feedback from my supervisor, but also since I applied already from UCL, we had a colleague, another PI, who was a previous Marie Curie Fellow. So I could share my application with him. He gave me excellent feedback. So that's pretty much, I think, the most important point, to get valuable feedback and actually speak with people who were already successful, because they know how to write a successful project and they will help you to make your own project successful. Technically, yes, the justification of resources, that's a very important point. So put special emphasis on that. Very important that this should be treated in context of your whole career track. So probably this will not be the first grant application you write, and certainly not the last one. So you might have already experiences how to do that, and in the future you will have more grant applications. So it will develop during your career track. So this should be treated in a context. And timing. So I was very lucky to have a German line manager, which means that he is very strict about timing, and the final time, final date is almost irrelevant, because I always must be ready to submit it a day before the deadline. It must be completely ready for submission at that time. And not to mention that in UCL, we have to bring the costing through our HR department, where they want to get the whole costing 3 weeks before the submission. So if I'm not ready to give a full proposal 3 weeks before the final deadline, they don't approve at institutional level. Not to mention that the head of department also want to see it, so that's our director. He also very busy, so it's a very unpolite thing to ask him to review it just with a very short deadline. So it's very good to have many people to check your application. And the final is the hosting environment. So that's again something which turned out to be very important. In Singapore, I remember we were sitting on the 13th floor of one of the A-star tower buildings with a friend of mine at that time, thinking about applying for a Marie Curie Fellowship. And actually I did that after my Singaporean time, and my application was successful. My friend also did, and he applied, and his application was not successful. And the reason why his application was rejected, that the reviewers didn't find his research environment, his university, to guarantee the result that he proposed. So it's very important to choose a good, it's in your field, a very, very good institute that has a good name, and also your professor, your supervisor, the more higher personality in your field, again, the better. But these are obvious things, so this is common sense. After that, it shouldn't be a problem, I think. I would like to emphasize the role of students. If you have students, that helps a lot. Again, I always learn them a lot by teaching them. That's excellent. And of course, as a result, a lot of interesting and good papers that will come out in your career track as a result of your Marie Curie Fellowship. I would like to a little bit advertise the Marie Curie Alumni Association as well, which is an excellent team of people, a very nice group, which every Marie Curie Fellow will be entitled to join, and I certainly encourage you to do that. Thank you very much for your attention, and with that, I would give back the word. I'm very happy to answer. If you have any question, just Google my name. You find my email address and everything online very easily. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Janusz. Thank you very much for your presentation. Sorry for rushing you, but we are way behind the schedule. If you have any questions to us, you will find us in the internet. Please check our Euraccess website for respective hubs. Please check the general Euraccess worldwide portal as well. And having said that, please do not hesitate to contact us. We are here to support your application, to help you. Please address your questions to us and to our experts that presented today. And some final ones from Jenny.
Yes, thank you so much, Tomasz. I just wanted to remind you for on 12th of August, 3 p.m. GMT 8, I think that's 9 a.m. In Europe, we'll be having a Q&A session again with Dr. Bronwyn Hyde and Dr. Brian Cahill. So I know that there are still a lot of questions that are in your mind. You still have concerns about how to do the proposal and the process. So please join us on the Facebook page of Euraccess ASEAN. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Brian Cahill, Dr. Bronwyn Hyde, Dr. Paweł Sikora, and Dr. Janos Kriston Vici, of course, our partners from Euraccess Japan and Euraccess Korea. Thank you so much to all of you who are joining us today. We will be giving the presentations to your emails, and we will also be uploading this video on our YouTube channel. So don't worry about that. So with that, have a good night from us and have a good afternoon or morning to those of you in Europe. Thank you so much. This is Jen. And in behalf of Euraccess ASEAN and Euraccess Worldwide, thank you so much for joining us. So have a good day and take care wherever you are. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.
Goodbye. Thank you so much.